about kicking out Greece. Kicking out Greece is just our proposal to make the Eurobonds work. Even if we're not kicking out Greece now, in 2 months to 3 months, Greece will run out of money and they will fail. And that is the time that Greece needs to go out from Eurozone. So now we're kicking out Greece to make the problems smaller. And moving on to my speech, first of all, I just want to say that today government sides have proved to you that Eurobonds is important, and government who create Eurobonds, and we only lend money to the country that's serious about cutting government spending and passing economic reforms. And we're keeping our Greece, and the last thing the government will do is to support European Central Bank. But what the opposition sides do, the opposition sides want to stick with the status quo. They don't want Greece to get kicked out, and they still helping Greece. So let's compare two sides, the benefit and harm. First, the government side, we create Eurobonds for solving the crisis. We create Eurobonds to make the relationship between Eurozone countries, and we create the Eurobonds to give time and give money to the countries that have problems like Greece, such as Spain or Italy. And what the opposition say, and we kick out Greece because we don't want them to be the one who the Eurozone down. And we let European Central Bank come in to control them, to check the money in that country about they spending, borrowing, they debt. And what the opposition sides do, the opposition sides come up and say that they don't want to kick out Greece. Okay, even if you don't kick out Greece, in just 2 to 3 months, Greece will run out of money and they will need to go out of the Eurozone. And also, we didn't say that we kick out every country that is the weakest. But now, Greece is too much. Greece is very, very weak. And we see that if Greece still in Eurozone, in just one day, the Eurozone will head to recessions. And we see now in the news yesterday, BBC News come up and say that Eurozone head to recessions. This is because Greece. It's not just because Greece, it's because the country that have problems like Greece. But what we will do, we will make Eurobonds that give them time, give them money to reforms and to cutting government spending. And that's the problems of crisis will be smaller and it will solving much more than just stuck with the status quo. And also, we see that if we just stop with these problems, we're not doing anything. The problems will get bigger, and one day the Eurozone will fail, and that would not be good to any countries. So, as in the country, every country sees, they all want to be successful. So, my team think that Eurobonds should be purchased.
1 minute to indicate the end of the second time, another bang at 7 minutes to indicate everyone is left, double bang at 8 minutes, or bang after 8 minutes 20. And without any further ado, I'd like to call on the first speaker from government to open the debate.
Ladies and gentlemen, my team believes that the creation of Eurobonds is a necessary part of the solution to solving the European debt crisis. Eurozones will be defined as a group of 17 countries in Europe that use the same currency, and Eurobonds is a 17 member states of Eurozone would collectively guarantee the debt rather than a single government. And also we use the proposal of borrowing countries would be responsible for the first 60% of the debt, and the remaining 40% would be backed by funds pooled by creditor countries. And what my team will do is first we will create Eurobonds, which, as I have said on my definitions, that we will strict on the 60%, 40% proposals. Second, we will only allow countries to use Eurobonds to borrow money who are demonstrating to us that they are serious about reforming their economy. Third, we will kick out Greece of the euro. And why we kick out Greece? Because we want everyone to see that we don't want Greece we don't want euro to be recession. And fourth, we will give European Central Bank real power to become a true monetary union. This means giving the European Central Bank power to set monetary policy that sets the interest rates of all countries into Eurozone and control the amount of borrowing and spending of countries in the Eurozone.
If you're going to kick out Greece anyway, why is there a need for Eurobond? Since the purpose of Eurobond is to help these countries that are in deficit in the first place.
Even if we create Eurobonds not just to help Greece, but we help other countries that have problems like Greece, such as Spain, and the Eurobonds will also help Eurozone to make relationships with countries. And I will talk about how the Eurobond is important and how our model will work. My second speaker will talk about why we need to kick out Greece and why we need to support European Central Bank. My first argument is how the Eurobond is important. First, it is interest of all countries that they want Euro to succeed. Every country in Eurozone, they all want Euro to be successful. So we see that Eurobonds will be a necessary part to help them to become successful. And also, what Eurobonds will do in troubled countries such as Spain and Italy need success to additional financing in order to continue to reform their economies. We see that Eurobonds will be part that help them to reform their economies and also helping them to continue reforming their economies. And also, a single currency occurs more trade among the nations of Europe, which lead to economic growth and a higher standard of living for Europeans. So what my team see is that Eurobonds is a very necessary part that will help to solve the problems of economies. And before moving on.
If your Eurobonds are so valuable and important, why can't they also be used to help out Greece? Apparently, we kick out Greece in order for Eurobonds to work.
Okay. And I will elaborate more in my next argument. My next argument is how our model will work. First, we create Eurobonds as our proposal that I have told you that borrowing country would be responsible for the first 60% of the debt, and the remaining 40% would be backed by funds pooled by creditor countries. And we create bonds for helping countries that have the problems with the economic and helping there to reform the economics. And second, debt from Eurobonds will only be available to those countries who demonstrate that they are serious about cutting government spending and passing economic reforms that will make their economics more competitive. Why we need to do this? We do this for other countries that have problems like Spain or Italy. They have problems like Greece. We want them to be serious about cutting government spending and reform their economics. So we will only help just the country that is serious on this point. And third, we will kick out Greece. We will kick out Greece because we don't want the weakest country in our team to pull down us to the weak point. And fourth, we give European Central Bank real power to become a true monetary union, as I have said. And to answer your POI that why we need to kick Greece out. We see that we kick Greece out because we don't want Eurozone to be recessions, and also even if we not kick Greece out, in about 2 to 3 months they will be run out of money. So that's why we think that we should not give them more chance. And how might a Eurobond solve the crisis? During the financial crisis, investors have been much less willing to buy the bonds of troubled Southern European countries, and much more willing to buy the bonds of Germany and some other financially stronger countries. That has made it much cheaper for Germany to borrow and prohibitively expensive for Greece, the Irish Republic and Portugal to borrow. The worry is that Spain and Italy may also find it too expensive to borrow. Introducing Eurobonds would level the playing field. All governments would be able to borrow at the same interest rates. And we see that Eurobonds will help every country around the Eurozone, and it also help the country in Eurozone too. Thank you.
This debate is about choosing the better economy model to solve the financial crisis within the Eurozone. Eurobonds will do nothing to reduce the overall level of debt within deficit countries like Greece, Portugal, or Italy, and let alone tackle the fundamental structural problems that they have, like in countries like Greece. But there's few problems with side proposition today. Firstly was the case setup. Let me first provide the case setup. Firstly, they wanted to kick out Greece from the get-go. And we see the point of the Eurobonds in the first place is to help deficit-prone countries like Greece, Portugal, and Italy to lower the interest rates so that investors can actually buy the bonds and and these countries can actually obtain their income or obtain the money to actually solve the financial crisis or to reduce their overall debt. That was the entire goal of the Eurobonds in the first place. And that's why Angela Merkel herself was very, very upset that Hollande wanted the Eurobonds to be imposed. But secondly, if they wanted to help countries like Portugal and Italy who also have huge financial problems and who also have debt problems if they didn't know, then why not extend it also to Greece? Because they're ultimately discriminating against Greece in the first place. But they're not consistent with their principles on side proposition. Because the entire goal of Eurobonds ultimately is to keep Greece within the Eurozone. Because ultimately Germany also benefits from a stable Eurozone because they are export-dependent countries, where they export their cars out towards internationally. That's why they had bailouts in the past 2 years to help Greece, and there were several austerity measures and reforms to help Greece, to keep Greece within within the Eurozone and not kick them out. We don't see the entire world of the proposition in today's debate. Secondly, they wanted a strong monetary union. But if you wanted a strong monetary union, why not just kick out all the deficit countries, deficit-prone countries like Portugal, Italy, and Spain, and why exclusively to Greece? Because the same thing could happen within a strong monetary union, where you also have countries that have huge debt problems like Portugal and Spain. So we don't see how is it actually going to help to contribute to a strong monetary union for strong policy when these countries are still in place. So their principles are still not consistent. But thirdly, they told us how the Eurobonds will actually help the economy within the Eurozone. We think that this is to challenge this idea. On the first level, we think that the Eurobonds contribute to an unstable economy. Why? Because they share a sovereign debt liability, and investors are more likely to not buy a bond which are liable to all countries, meaning the bond is inclusive of deficit-prone countries like Greece, Italy, and Spain. At the end of the day, in conclusion, whenever they are buying a bond that has those kind of shared liability, they won't feel as much secure. Because why? Comparatively, if they buy an individual bond from Germany where they know it's strong, they will feel more secure to buy a bond there. But when it's a shared liability and the treaty is not shared and Germany doesn't want to be a part of the Eurobonds, we think that's where investors doesn't feel secure or don't feel secure to buy those bonds. So we don't see how they're going to help the economy in the first place. But on the second level, if they really wanted to help the Eurozone in the first place, they would include Greece. Because ultimately, Germany itself has already invested so much in Greece by putting in the bailouts by the European Commission Bank. Why are they now letting go of all the efforts of several $1 trillion worth of money and let Greece go out and probably even have a new currency like the drachma, which will also impact on Germany's economy. So we don't see how the Eurobonds is going to help in that case. But let me move on to the several alternatives that on-site opposition, thank you, site opposition is going to bring today. Firstly, the alternative that China is already investing in Greece, that there are already several billions of dollars that they are including within the economy. Costco owns 95% of the shipping ports and 20% of the union members in Greece gotten their electricity back since China ended. We see a slow but yet stable growth within promoting jobs within Greece since China ended. Second alternative is the austerity measures that are currently taking place. Greece Prime Minister Anthony Samaras is already implementing the austerity measures to reduce the overall level of debt. We think that this is extremely effective in the long-term progression when you want to reduce the debt to a more stable economy. The economist Mario Draghi also heads the European Commission Bank, also believes that cutting budget is extremely good for growth. So we see these kind of alternatives that are in place to counterbalance the idea of a Eurobonds, and we see a very slow but yet stable progression within Greece to help promote jobs and to help people to survive on their own and to help them earn income. No, thank you. The stance taken by opposition is extremely clear. We think that it's principally better for Eurozone to not have Eurobonds. My second speaker will talk about the harms towards deficit countries. I will have one argument for you today. How the Eurobonds diminishes credibility. Firstly, the Eurobonds have a shared sovereign debt liability. That means countries like Portugal, Italy, and Greece can borrow money easily without feeling the pinch. That means that there is a safety net for this comfort zone for these countries. That means that they are also less inclined to use the money wisely, unlike the scenario where they have to actually borrow their money individually. We think there's a huge burden on the state then to use the money as responsibly as they can. But the conclusion to this argument also means that when Eurobonds is in place, they lose the huge incentive to spend their money in the most efficient manner because the other secured countries like Germany, Austria, and Finland are the ones guaranteeing the bond. That means they feel less of a pinch whenever they borrow money and they don't feel that much of an impact compared when they individually sell their bonds and the kind of sense of duty is more prominent there. But the second level is this. There is a huge lack of fiscal discipline. With the Eurobonds, what's the guarantee that deficit countries won't overspend like how Greece did in the last decade? Because how Greece got this huge deficit, about 3% of the GDP, which is the maximum level permitted by the Maastricht Treaty in 1992, was because they overspent their budget, and that's how exactly they got into the financial crisis in the first place. With Eurobonds, the shared liability of the security, what's the incentive for this government to not spend? There's a huge lack of fiscal discipline that we see when you impose Eurobonds, because there's no solid financial discipline for countries like Greece to reform structural problems and to put their own financial problems in order whenever they can keep borrowing money with, below the 60% of the coupon proposal. We see it's bad for the country because now you're not going to promote any form of growth when they don't have the kind of fiscal discipline that you need. So my second argument is this, before that is,
So as you said that no one to borrow money from Greece. No, they're not spending money on Greece. So do you want Greece to make the eurozone recession?
No, we think that ultimately why they bailed out so many bills was to keep Greece within the eurozone, because they wanted a stable eurozone, because Germany itself was extremely dependent on export from a stable eurozone. They're the one that benefits the most from a stable eurozone, and that's why we need to keep Greece in. That's why the austerity measures are in place. That's why China's investing in Greece. There are so many alternatives compared to a euro bond where there's a shared sovereign debt liability. It's so much more dangerous for investors and also for the eurozone as a whole. So we don't see how is that good. But then my second argument is this: how is it harmful towards Germany? Because on the first level, EU treaties forbid any joint debt liabilities, and Angela Merkel herself said that the German constitution doesn't allow it. It means that when there's a sovereign debt liability, you also jeopardize Germany's economy and make it more unstable, because now it has to be responsible for more than the single country and to be directly responsible for their own debt. But on the second level, I think Germany also has to pay higher interest rate. That means that they have to input about $230 billion for euro bonds. That means that their own taxpayers are paying so much money to helping citizens in Greece. While we also have to take into consideration that Greece is good for Germany's economy, but also the very point that Germany also has to be responsible to their own and accountable to their own citizens, which they are already helping to build up through the European Commission Bank. So we see that Germany's economy is also highly affected when the Eurobonds are in place. Madam Chair, ultimately this debate is about choosing the best economic model, and we think Eurobonds destroy the kind of financial stability that we have. We told you several alternatives that are way better, and that's exactly why I'm extremely proud to propose.
We thank the Leader of Opposition and follow the Deputy Prime Minister.
Ladies and gentlemen, my team, opposition team, stands for the creation of Eurobonds is the necessary part of the solution to solve the European debt crisis. Before moving on, I have some rebuttal to rebut the opposition side. But the first rebuttal is about our case. We were going to keep Greece out to be an example to other countries in the Eurozone that we are serious about the debt crisis. And even if we didn't keep Greece out, they will out anyway, because they couldn't pass a reform, then they will run out of the money by the end of October. And another thing is they say that they need Greece in the Eurozone. We see that Greece now pulled down the economy of the Eurozone. And it will even go worse to the countries in Europe. We create Eurobonds to solve the debt crisis for the countries like Italy, Germany, to the countries that still can be helped. But Greece, we already bailed out 2 times, and they will not now. And Greece didn't do anything, just waiting for help, waiting for us to bail them out, to give them money. And we see that this is not necessary to solve the debt crisis. And Eurobond is the best way to solve the European debt crisis. Yes.
Why is fiscal discipline only exclusive to your Thailand? When in Greece, if you haven't implemented austerity, that can happen without the Eurobond as well.
Well, I will answer it right. So moving on to my first argument. First argument is about the keeping Greece out shows that we only loan the money to the countries that pass the reform or austerity. Greece is a very good example in this case, because Greece is a country that failed and asked for help of other countries without doing anything or making any change of themselves. The problem that Greece fails is that there's too much pensions, the retirement is too early, and the public sector workers get welfare too much. Also, the inflexible law. So there's no point of still helping them, then we keep them out. It will be an example for other countries in Europe that we're serious if the countries has a problem and doesn't help themselves. To keep them out, another reason is that, no thank you. To keep them out is the way to show that we will loan the money to them by using a Eurobond only. And Eurobond is the way that the countries will help themselves by loaning money first, then paying back to the borrowing countries rate of 60% and 40%. And another reason is we have to keep why we need to create the Euro bonds in order to help the countries like Italy so that it won't be too late. Yes.
When you kick Greece out and default, we think about huge recession to other Eurozone countries, like what happened to the Union Bank or the SPAC. How does that help the Eurozone?
Because we see that if we keep Greece out, then other countries in Eurozone can still increase the economic growth. Now, Greece is decreasing the economic growth in Eurozone. And we see that there's no point in still helping them anymore. And this will be a good example to the countries that almost fell to hurry to help themselves first before they get kicked out. No. So moving on to my second argument, it's about new model of ECB with more controls and one monetary policy. We see that new model of the European Central Bank or ECB with more controls and one monetary policy. This model will help to solve the problem of the countries that still waiting for help without doing anything by checking their GDP, checking the country's GDP. For example, if the GDPs of the country is more than 4%, we will not helping them so that it will give them a pressure and giving them an example to help themselves and fix the economy before they get out. Also, giving the ECB new powers will prevent another debt crisis from happening in the future. So, to summarize our team, the proposition proved to you how Eurobond work for the whole Euro to harmonize the debt. And this bond is not an individual bond because it will create the Eurobond will create a trust and ensure that another countries and investor will buy it. And we see that to bail out them is not work anymore and is not a necessary way to help the countries like Greece or Italy. And also we prove to you how Eurobond and ECB work. ECB will set the limit of spending of their countries and debt if it balanced to each other. We will support ECB to go and check in every country about their economy so that ECB can limit the spending of everything and then each country to solve the problem of debt that are increasing. And to harmonize that is the way to decrease risk. And because Euro is a united, so it's easier for the countries to borrow no thank you and buy bond in order to help themselves. So we see that Greece right now is the weakest member in the Eurozone. And to create the Euro bond is to help the countries and warning the countries that they should help themselves first before it's too late for Greece. We kick out Greece for two reasons. The first reason is to be an example for the countries, for the other countries in the Eurozone. And the second reason is that Greece right now is put out in the economic Eurozone and this is the weakest member of our Eurozone right now. But we didn't mean that we will cut. We already helped them by bail out them 2 times, and we see that the result is that they didn't do anything at all. They just waiting for our money and they pay the same pension and no thank you. So that we see that the Euro bond will be a long-term benefit for the countries and the rest of the Eurozone. And my team stands for, we see that the Euro bond is the necessary part of the solution to solve the European debt crisis. And I'm very proud to propose.
Prime Minister and following the Euro opposition.
If Eurobonds were so effective, there would be no need to pick up Greece. But what's worse on the decided house is that they have no yardstick to whether how can they judge a country whether to kick them out. Because when we do set the yardstick to do so, it is morally unjustified to leave out the Greeks, to leave out the Italians, and to leave out the Spanish people in a helping economy in today's debate. But I have 2 points of arguments in my speech today. Firstly, I'm going to tell you the harms towards deficit countries. But secondly, I will also tell you the harms towards future investors. Before that, 2 points of rebuttals. The first one, how effective are Eurobonds? 4 responses to that. Firstly, kicking Greece out isn't going to help anyway. We see this in past presidents. When if it really did work, why did Euro not do it already anyway? But even if, right, they never really respond to how in situations, how these Eurobonds actually help in sustaining bailouts and China's, which are alternatives that are occurring right now. Because they never engage with us on how our alternatives going to work. Because if the risk of Eurobonds are so high, and that is way better to maintain the Euro while all of this work within Greece and how it can help these deficit countries. But second response, in the same principle that they are sending us today, they would also punish Spain and Italy, which is not going to help citizens of their country. Because the PM never really clarified where is the yardstick are they going to draw, whether to kick out the country or not. Because if their only justification to kicking out Greece is that because Greece is pulling the Eurozone down, then in the same logic, they would also kick out Spain and Italy, which in that sense is not good for Europe at all. Because if you start kicking out everyone, then obviously you would create a regional deficit in that sense, which is not helpful towards Germany in any absolutist concept. But third response to this, countries know that they have to do something. It's not that they're complacent about this right now. We tell you that it's not mutually exclusive, that Germany can also send out the message that countries cannot be complacent. Because Germany already pushes towards austerity measures, towards Greece right now, that Germany does impose that you need to follow certain guidelines. And this is a message enough, right? But what response to this? The converse burden on the government now is that since they're going to kick out all these countries, that countries like Italy and Spain are also going to feel threatened about this, then these countries would also not agree to Eurobonds. Because since you also agree that Eurobonds are contingent on how well a Eurozone can work together, then since these countries are not going to cooperate anyway, then Eurobonds will be counterproductive on their paradigm. But second, rebuttal to this, how do regulations work? Because DPM talked a lot about ECB and how they can regulate Greece, right? 2 responses. Firstly, they never prove why is it mutually exclusive. Because ECB can always regulate countries right now. They can always monitor how Greece and Spain and Italy are spending their resources right now. But secondly, what's worse on their paradigm is that when you kick out Greece of the Eurozone, then you cannot monitor where the money is going. You cannot have at least where you know the austerity measures are working out. But what's the harm towards Germany in this way is that they do not have an actual stake within these countries, which is extremely bad towards the stake of Germany. Because what they want is to help these Greece countries in the first place. Is that's why they need bailouts and help people by lending the money in the first place. So it is in the interest of Germany to help these deficit countries. But what happens when you do kick them out of their paradigm? Then obviously that these interests are counterproductive towards all the long-term goals. But before I move on with my substantives, yes ma'am.
So your team will still bail out Greece forever?
Look, what you never engage with my leader opposition, that there is alternatives that are working within things right now. Because if bailouts did work and managed to sustain Greece in for time for China to come in and help them, but secondly, they also to implement austerity and fiscal discipline within the nation, then that's obviously going to work. But also, how does it connect with my argument? First argument, how does this harm towards deficit countries? 3 levels of analysis. First level is, why did nations like Italy and Greece get into debt to begin with? A, it's because they were spending lavishly, when Greece had a retirement age of 40s when people weren't actually working. But B, they also didn't tax people enough, when pools, a cultural norm in Greece, were not taxed at all. But C, they also failed to follow regulations that was in the Eurozone. Because the Maastricht Treaty in 1991, they weren't supposed to borrow more than 3% of their GDP. But countries like Greece did it anyway. So the conclusion to the argument is that the problem started internally, not from a lack of investors or anything like that. But the second analysis is the first alternative. We want to not implement fiscal discipline. Why? It's because the moral hazard in this situation in Eurobonds doesn't require them to change internally. Because regulations, if happen in their paradigm, only forces these nations to meet a minimal requirement. Because now there's no incentive whatsoever for these nations to start taxing and solve the actual internal problems within the country. But fiscal discipline isn't necessary within their paradigm. What we tell them is because it makes sure that these countries don't go back to its roots problem where it overspends its money, and austerity and fiscal are the proper solutions to this because it tackles the root cause. But it doesn't happen in their paradigm. And what is the harm to this? Which is the third level. What is the harm towards sustainability? A, because it creates a temporary sense of stability within these countries. Because now it creates a sense of complacency where these countries are relying on Germany to help share that current burden. When the burden is weakened in Spain or Italy's sense, what happens is that they are complacent about how they're doing things. And taking out risk isn't going to help anyway. But B, it also cannot sustain a long-term economy. Because only an economy that has a future, that has a proper influx of fiscal input can only then tackle the debts which are currently existing within them. But what happens then is that when they continue not having that enough fiscal input, is that you end up in a continuous cycle of debt. This is because the root problem is never solved. So the first conclusion to this is that although Eurobonds might seem pretty to begin with, it is no way actually pushing towards a sustainable economy. A sustainable economy is only dependent on how well a fiscal discipline works. But before I move on, yes ma'am.
Do you think that Greece and Eurozone will be a good example? If other countries who see that Greece built out 2 times and they still can be in Eurozone. So other countries, if this crisis happen again, do you think that you can solve the problem?
Look, just by never really Googling on how just a country realizing that I'm going to get kicked out of the Eurozone is actually going to force them towards pushing these austerity measures. But it never proved to us why that cannot happen in our paradigm. Because it can happen in the current status quo. But what's even worse right now, I've told you, since Prime Minister conceded that Eurobonds are contingent upon how well countries work together, then deficit countries also feel threatened by the proposal then. But the second substantive is this: how is it harmful towards future investors? 2 levels of this. Firstly, you give off a false perception of stability. Because nations like Greece and Spain, where the economy is not well, but they still give off the perception and engineering that this. So although the interest rates are low, when it's temporarily stable, it actually distorts the real stability of the country. But what happens is, the second level, how is it harmful? Because A, when it's effectively deception by the Eurozone towards the investors within the circuit, right? Because when investors falsely invest within a nation, that's tantamount to cheating. Because now these investors are not knowing the actual situation of the countries. But there's no sense of trust also there, because now since economies rely on a bona fide relationship, that relationship is also threatened there. But B, what happens is, it's also harmful towards the prospects of Greece. Because right now, it adds on to the current perception that Greece is cheating on its statistics, like it did in 2003. So investors no longer have an incentive or trust to actually invest with these countries in long-term life. The conclusion to this argument is, although Euro has a mandate to protect the investors, right? So when they don't, the missing trust within the relationship will be harmful towards the prospects of ever attracting investors in post-Eurozone economies. So what I told you today, Madam Chair, I told you the mobile model is extremely counterproductive. I told you why is it better to stay with the alternatives and why is it extremely important for investors and countries to have fiscal discipline and to attract this model. With that, I'm about to close.
Ladies and gentlemen, in this debate, my team stands for, we believe that the creation of Eurobonds is a necessary part of the solution to solve the European debt crisis that are happening nowadays. First, I have 2 points of rebuttal to provide the leader of conclusions. My first rebuttal is about they say that we're going to punish Spain and Italy like the reason that we're going to keep out. We didn't mean that we're going to punish Spain, the country like Spain and Italy. What we're going to do is we're using the Eurobonds to help them. Eurobonds will help them to increase the economic growth and will help them to solve the problem. And about this, picking Greece out, what are we doing? That picking Greece out will not help. I will explain this more in my cash point. Moving on to my second rebuttal, the second rebuttal is about the opposition has claimed that to us that our model will not be effective because we kicking Greece out. That means we cannot help all the countries that are having the same problems that are having a problem like in Greece. But what we see that when we kick them out to be the real example that what we're doing is the real punishment, that if the country like Spain, like Italy are still doing things like Greece doing before moving on.
Madam, why can't our governments like international investment and austerity measures work better because it doesn't have the same liability risk as the new bonds?
They already have an austerity measure to Greece, and why we keep Greece out because Greece didn't pass this reform. Greece is not really serious in this. Greece is still doing something else, and they're not being serious, and they didn't pass the austerity measure, so they need to be kicked out. And moving on to my clash point, in this debate I have two clash points to present. So my first clash point is about the Eurobond versus the status quo. From my side, see that Eurobond is the best thing, is the most important thing to solve the problem in Eurozone nowadays. But the opposite side still see that Eurobond won't solve many things, which will be the better. Moving on, for my first topic is about how this side will be better and how this side will work. From our side, we see that the Eurobond will help the country. The Eurobond will help the countries like Spain, like Italy, and like Portugal to increase their economic growth, so that they won't have a lot of debt and there will be a problem like Greece that they need to be figured out. And about our team and I want them to support the European Central Bank. It will help the Spain, Italy one. How will it help? First, the European Central Bank will, as my first two speakers has already said, that the European Central Bank will limit about the money that if your GDP is higher than 4%, they won't be able to borrow money from the European Central Bank. And what the country needs to do if they cannot, because of their GDP is more than 4, they need to fix their country so that they don't need to have the update and fix their country by the oldest, so that their GDP will be less than 4 and they can solve their debt. They can borrow money from the European Central Bank, because European Central Bank will restrict all the country in Eurozone about how are they going to use money. And moving on to my second subtopic is about the harm and benefit from each side. In our side, is that what are we going to solve? The problem is about the debt. In the country, it's the problem that we're going to solve by using the Eurobond and the new model of the European Central Bank. And for this opposition side, we see that what the opposition side is doing will not give any benefit, and what are they doing is they want to keep it out. They just disagree because they see that Greece is not important, so that they want to get out. And what they are doing is wrong. Why? Because what Greece is doing now, Greece isn't being responsible for their country. In this morning news, the news released this morning about it. Greece is now have a really bad economy. Their economy is really bad now, and now it is pulling the Eurozone down. This is a very bad situation that the things that they can do is they need to kick Greece out, because Greece is pulling their economies down. And this shows us what the opposite side, that they still leave the Greece into the Eurozone, that they will still leave Greece in the Eurozone will create the problem that they will pull down more, that they will pull Eurozone economics down more. Moving on to my second clash point. For my second clash point is about should we kick Greece out or not? In our side, we see that kick Greece out is the best way, because it will give us lots of benefits. It will solve the problems, but the opposition side sees that Greece is a very important part of the Eurozone, that you should not kick Greece out. And for my first subtopic is about what will happen if we don't kick Greece out. The thing that will happen, as I have already said in this morning news, that now Greece is pulling their economy down, is pulling the Eurozone economy down, which is a very bad situation, and Greece is now didn't do anything. The other country like more harder and harder for a country that are irresponsible like Greece. Is this fair? So it's not fair because one country needs to work hard for another country that didn't do anything. And so we see that kick Greece out is the best because for the second cycle is about the benefit from kicking Greece out. Because for kicking Greece out, first it will show as an example for other countries like Italy and Spain that if you're still doing like Greece, you will be kicked out so that they will improve they will reform their country so that they will be kicked out because every country would be scared to be kicked out. And to summarize, we see that first, Eurobond is the most important thing to solve the problem because there is a country like Spain, like Italy, that they need to solve the problem of their debt so that they will be like Greece. That we need to kick them out because it is pulling the Eurozone economy down. So we see that Eurobond is the best way to solve the problems and I'm very, very proud to propose. Thank you.
We can't stand for that. On side opposition, we rejected the idea of making it easier for countries like Greece, Italy, and Spain to borrow more money. We rejected the idea of shared liability, and we provided you alternatives that work. But first, before we go on to all those complicated issues, we need to first tackle the issue of Greece. Because essentially, this debate became a debate about whether we should take out Greece or not. Because their proposal was contingent on the idea that not only will we have Eurobonds, we will also keep Greece out of the Eurozone, and somehow this will make the economy better here. So we have to deal with this argument before we go on. And if we can deal with this argument, their proposal is very fundamental to support. We'll deal with this issue in two levels. First of all, why kicking Greece out is a bad idea and we just should not propose that. But second of all, why kicking them out is inconsistent with the principles of the Eurobond and how you cannot propose Eurobonds and kicking out Greece at the same proposal. First of all, why kicking Greece out is a bad idea. Number one, many European countries have been heavy investments in Greece. They've heavily invested in countries like Germany, Austria and such. Second of all, if Greece gets kicked out of the Eurozone, they will have to adopt a different currency such as the drachma instead of the euro. Thirdly, this is extremely problematic because the drachma will be extremely undervalued and we also cannot exert pressure for them to reform them because they're no longer part of our economic bloc, they're not a separate entity, so therefore we cannot exert pressure for them to change their proposals and change their reforms. Fourthly, this is where the major problem comes on because of that, we lose a severe chunk of our investments in Greece. When the currency becomes undervalued, we lose a lot of our money. Even more so, we have no way of controlling them and making sure we have the return of investment. This is why on the fifth level, we have never even considered kicking out Greece in the beginning. If it was such a simple solution, just kick out Greece and settle them. You would have done it a long time ago and saved us all this pain and hassle. But you haven't done so because by doing so, all the European countries suffer economically and it's never in their best interest to kick out Greece. The question then becomes, is kicking out Greece consistent with the ideals of a Eurobond? Because they tried to make it seem as though Eurobonds are a great idea, but as a safeguard, will kick out Greece to make it seem more secure. But this is also problematic. Why so? This deals with the question of why it's inconsistent to propose both at the same time. First of all, the idea of Eurobonds, the principle behind it, is the idea of debt collectivization and also protecting the weaker members. How does this work? Because the weaker members pay lower interest rates. That means they can borrow money and pay less in the end. Whereas stronger states such as Germany and Austria, they'll pay higher interest rates because previously they've enjoyed security. Now because you collectivize the debt, you protect the weaker members at the expense of the stronger members. But this is the problem. By kicking out Greece on the second level, you're essentially saying that you should kick out the weaker members and kick out any European country that is weak. This defeats the purpose of having a Eurobond. Because the Eurobond is meant to protect the weak countries, and if you say we're going to kick out the weak countries, it defeats the very principle you'll ever wish to propose a Eurobond in the first place. Even more so, this is where proposing both at the same time becomes a problem because Eurobonds are meant to create security. That's one of the principles behind it. It's the idea that we are one and we'll share the risk together. But by kicking out these members, you create fear and insecurity because no one's position in the Eurozone is now guaranteed. When you're weak, you're automatically out. Even worse, this means that the interest rate of the Eurobonds in itself will also skyrocket because when investors see that countries are just getting kicked out every now and then, do you think they will have the perception that this is a safe investment for them to make? Because the moment you say we're going to kick out the weak country and you're also going to have Eurobonds, the Eurobonds become weak and lose its interest rate. Investors are not going to make a stupid decision to invest in something where it's so unstable and the country is exiting and entering the Eurozone at any time. Bonds are also about perception, and and you create the perception that no one's position is guaranteed, people are not going to invest in your bonds. Making that example is too much. Making that example of kicking them out, which is what they want to propose, is a terrible idea. You're scaring off investors and you're not helping. It's not practical in any aspect. So we deal with that idea. But before I go on, yes.
So, if you still bail out Greece, does this mean that every country needs to give money to Greece?
Thank you, madam. See, this is really funny because we never use the word bailout in our entire speech except in response to your arguments when you question us a bailout. We have alternatives such as foreign investment and historic austerity. And this is where we come to the second issue. How do we best alleviate the economic problem? In essence, how do we solve the economic problem? This is what they propose. First of all, we'll incentivize weaker states to borrow by lowering the interest rates. That's the fundamental principle of a Eurobond. Second of all, the idea is that they can use this money and spend this money they borrow to reform and such. Thirdly, the idea of the ECB will regulate spending of this money or something on that line. So it's very clear. This is why it won't work. First of all, giving incentives to states to borrow more money only leads them to the root cause of why we have the problem to begin with, to put it in very simple terms. In 1991, when we signed the Maastricht Treaty, we said to all these countries, you will not borrow more than 3% of your GDP. What happened? They borrowed more than 3% of their GDP, and this is why we have the current economic crisis today, because Greece decided to spend more, borrow more than it was allowed to borrow. But now, by having Eurobonds, we're essentially saying, we're going to allow you to borrow more money at a lower interest rate, incentivizing the fact and making it easier for them to borrow the money and not allowing them to feel the full pinch of their proposal. So the idea here is, who's to say that they're going to be responsible for the money they borrow? What if in the case they do splurge, as they did previously, and they can't pay their share of the Eurobonds when it comes to that matter? How then do you have any sense of accountability? Because while the ECB can regulate it and set conditions, these are ultimately just conditions, and if the Greece and Italy and Spain do not fulfill these conditions, ultimately you achieve nothing. But going on, even more so, it's a terrible thing to do because countries like Spain and Italy will not feel the pinch of their borrowing and they're not going to make efficient decisions. Why? Because A, they leverage their risk on other countries. Investments also about having risk and calculating the risk and seeing which is the best investment to make. By not feeling the pinch of your borrowing, when you say that you're going to leverage your risk in other countries and they're going to feel the pinch for your decisions, this is essentially what Eurobonds are. They're going to make irrational, risky decisions. Because if you're not directly liable for all the money you borrow, when other people have your back and say, I will also back you up and borrow this money, you're not going to make the most efficient decisions because in your back of your mind, you know that someone else is going to cover your tab whenever it's necessary. Even though so there's less incentive to reform. Because if you don't push for things like austerity measures and foreign investment, these people are just going to keep on borrowing and they will always expect other countries to pick up that. Even more so, it's going to make them less efficient. Why so? Liability drives efficiency. When you're directly liable for the thing, your actions, you're always going to make the most efficient decision because you're always going to have the direct consequence of the action. By having other countries take the tab for you, you're not going to make the most efficient decisions for your country because someone else always has the tab. But what really do we propose? We propose two things. Foreign investment. For example, China's already come in and got up 95% of the shipping costs in Greece. And what has happened is alleviated the suffering of people. 20% of the people at shipping costs now have electricity, which is a lot better than what they had previously. They started creating a lot of jobs. But the important thing here is that there's still a sense of liability and accountability. Greece, to a certain extent, still feels the pinch of their overspending because they have less sense of control. Now China has control of the shipping costs. Our proposal ensures a certain level of accountability, but at the same time, we alleviate the problem. More so, we propose austerity measures. They should have always been there. Greece was just an unusual example when they did not have the typical norms of any other countries. Austerity allows them to cut spending and have more revenue to invest in projects which are necessary. We're very proud to oppose. We don't think that Eurobonds are in any way going to solve the problem. Thank you.
The Eurobonds only serve to hide the underlying structural problem behind the veil of euphemism, and that's what's so damaging regarding their proposal. I'm going to structure my replies just in three main questions. Firstly, what is the best way to actually solve the financial crisis? Secondly, is kicking out Greece the best solution for the EU? And thirdly, how will this affect Germany? Firstly, what is the best way to solve the financial crisis? Because we were very clear from the start. We told you there are several alternative methods to actually solve the financial crisis within the EU. Firstly, we told you there was Chinese investors coming in and 95% of Costco company owns the shipping within Greece and actually allow them to have some sort of income, and their electricity actually came back after Chinese companies came in. But secondly, we also told you austerity measures are taking place to actually reduce the overall level of debt. And the Greece Prime Minister himself explicitly told the rest of the world in the news that they were going to impose the austerity measures in these few months, and it takes time, but it will be imposed. But there was no clear response on side proposition on why exactly our alternatives were bad. Because we told you there was less of a shared liability, because there was less of a risk comparatively to Eurobonds, where the sovereign debt liability are pulled in together. Ours have less of a risk, rest of the risk in that perspective. But secondly, second level, is that there was also a sense of accountability for the Greek government. Why? Because they are also liable for their own debt, comparatively to also Eurobonds, where it's a shared liability and they are able to borrow money without actually taking a pinch of that. It's like a safety net for these deficit-prone countries, because they're not able to do the kind of impact when actually they borrow it individually. So we see a huge problem on that side. But secondly, the second question is this: is kicking out Greece the best solution for the Eurozone? Because the government in today's debate took a huge burden when they told us they wanted to kick out Greece and then diverted the entire debate. But we're going to deal with it anyways. The first level, Eurobonds was actually supposed to help Greece and to protect and to secure deficit-prone countries. That's why the government didn't have a clear objective. Because if you wanted to kick out Greece and have the Eurobonds, then what's the entire goal of having the Eurobonds in the first place? Because you wanted to have a shared sovereign liability to actually secure this deficit-prone country so that they will stay in the Eurozone instead of kicking them out and devalue the entire countries, which will actually affect the neighboring countries and probably go into recession like how the Lehman Brothers went in 2008. But secondly, the countries like Germany and Austria, the more secure countries, invested a lot in Greece, where they would actually approve the bailout and the funding. We think that they also benefit a lot from a stable Eurozone, because they are very export-dependent countries, like I told you before, because they export cars, they export local goods. We think that they also that there's huge investment with Greece. But thirdly, we think that the benchmark that government set up was unclear, because they will kick out the weakest member from the Eurozone. That means that in the long term, it will also eventually apply to other countries like Portugal, Italy, or Spain. So we don't see how is that going to help, because how are you going to form a strong monetary union if you're going to consistently kick out the weakest member within the monetary union, and you're not going to, and eventually the Eurozone is not going to be a one-stable Eurozone where investors are not going to come in, because now you know that it's very liable to prone to a lot of risk. Their investment is not going to be secure within the Eurozone because they're going to continuously kick out members. There was no clear benchmark that was set up by the government case. But fourthly, we also told you that the Eurozone also used a bond to pressure the Greece government to reform. Because if Greece is ultimately kicked out from the Eurozone, you can't have the kind of same bond that you can pressure them to impose austerity measures to reform their financial problems. And that was the main advantage on our side, because we would never kick out Greece, because ultimately we benefit a lot from having Greece within the Eurozone, because we're an export-dependent country, because we already have investment that's lying within Greece itself. The second question is this: what is the best way to actually solve the financial crisis? Because opposition had alternative methods, and we told you clearly, but it was not responded clearly also. But how will this also affect Greece? That's the third question. Because Greece also have to pay a higher interest rate, and their own taxpayers are already complaining about the money that they are paying so much to Greece. When we already told you the alternative method, which the taxpayers don't have to pay as much as the money, and there's also reduced the rest of the sovereign liability risk. So we see our alternatives will work best in the long term, but there's a huge progressive within the financial reforms within Greece or the country. That's extremely why I'm extremely proud to